as good as hers. She was the right arm for my family, and we certainly looked up to her. I don't remember anything specific that she sewed for me, but she wanted me to be a good dresser when I grew up. Someone had to distill that within me, and who else would that be? A great sewer and always making clothes. I don't remember how old I was when my sister fell in love with a young man from a town nearby ours, and they got married. I can't remember his name, just that they were very happy together. Unfortunately, they didn't have very many years of happiness before they had to run away and live and work on a farm, and that's where they were captured and sent to Auschwitz. Your grandma once told me after the war that the only reason she survived was the hope that she would be with her husband, never thinking that he wouldn't make it. Cheryl Shiner. I remember in school, and my dad was asked to talk about it once, and he spoke a little. You know, you just could tell he didn't want to talk about it. I'm talking I was like in 2nd or 3rd grade, so he was just answering like little questions. But I do remember when I took my father outside the room, and this little boy ran up to him, and he was like, "Can I see your arm? Do you have that tattoo?" And he didn't, because he wasn't in a concentration camp. But that's what the little kid remembered about the Holocaust. That's so young, 3rd grade. And it like bothered me. I remember feeling protective, like I had to defend my dad. Like, you come out running here and that's what you want to remember, the tattoo on his arm? Well, I think honestly, my siblings and I, we were talking about it. I think my father, like, because he had such a weird childhood, he kind of like he's unemotionally involved. Like, he worked and that was his thing. He put everything into his work, and my mother is really the one that brought us up. I would think that because my mother probably overcompensated so much for my father. I would think that it had to be different if a woman was going through the Holocaust. Whereas, especially for a father and a husband, especially back then, the sole financial provider, they could probably just bury themselves in the work that they were doing. Morris Shackney. Dear Amy, please be patient with me. Because of my limited vision, I'm blind in my right eye, I read slowly, and I type only with one finger. I spend most of my time playing bridge, 7 to 10 times a week, several times a day. It's hard work, but lots of fun. I used to enjoy listening to books on tape on my long drives to Florida, but now I am blind in one eye, and I listen to audiobooks when I'm eating my meals because I find it difficult to read. I like staying busy. I'm out of the house, mostly playing bridge. You are right when you remember that the family used to meet at Betty's house, which was in the same neighborhood that your grandma lived in Brooklyn. And we'd always have a little party or gathering or diner or something like that as a family. You have me thinking back to the old days. We all grew up in Czechoslovakia, where we were born. So let me see if I can describe my life as I remember. First of all, since we were a family of 8 after 1937, that's when my younger brother Benji was born. Our house, as small as it was, contained a nice garden where my family planted scallions and carrots and cucumbers, lettuce, cabbage, and even corn, which I think supplied most of our needs on a daily basis. I do remember a small adventure. There was an empty land on both sides of the street before you reached our house. But one Friday, me and my sister Betty, we went down there to pick cherries off of a tree, and we came back so late it was almost the beginning of Sabbath. And my mother was anxiously waiting our return and of course upset that we were so late. It must have certainly made an impression on me because I remember it so vividly. Otherwise, the days seemed to just be the same. The only thing that was different was our week, the Sabbath, the holidays. That was when we were home together and we celebrated and we ate our good meals. It was customary that my older sisters, such as your grandma, and Rizel and Betty and Sarah, they would help around the house while my older brothers would help my dad. And of course, whenever, we had chores to do. I don't recall having any chores because I was so young. As an old Jewish family, schooling was really important. Our parents raised us religious, so on the Sabbath we ate together, and our father was usually traveling during the week, gathering his fruits and his nuts and everything for his business. All week he'd travel around the countryside and buy produce. He'd crate them and ship them to factories. The geese and ducks he'd gather for feathers and down, and that we prepared for our meals. Fruits like cherries and apples and pears were then crated into boxes and shipped to factories and wineries in the larger cities. My father never had the time or took the time to tell me stories of when he was young or lived in Poland or wherever. And my mother, for that, she lived in Hungary, but I don't really know anything about their younger days. I guess we were just too busy struggling with everyday life. Jane Adler. Your grandma's lemon bars. That's how I always think about Hannah. I don't remember what else was served, but all I remember was her lemon bars. And it must have been like powdered sugar all over him at Aunt Betty's house every Sunday. We go to Betty's house because she had a basement that was finished. Times are different because then everyone was in Brooklyn, but now everyone's spread out all over the place. But I remember every Sunday, we'd all be one big family gathered around a table in Brooklyn. Betty, Sarah, Hannah, your mom, all of us kids. But I don't remember anyone talking about the Holocaust ever. I heard bits of family stories, but it's not like the whole family sat down at a Jewish event and just started talking about stories. In hindsight, maybe one of them did, but we weren't paying attention. I just remember loving Betty's white rice. Now that's pretty simple, right? White rice, but I remember her rice, it was different. It was like home-cooked, sticky kind of rice. It's so funny what you remember. And Betty's basement, we were there every week. I was the youngest of four, so I was probably dragged there the most. I have to say, we weren't religious like the rest of them, so there was more distance between us. We're in Indiana now, and there aren't very many Jews here. I have to be honest. If anything, my father, as he's gotten older, maybe over the past 10 years, he's finally opened up a little bit, and he talks, but, he does weird things, like, I was there for a weekend, and the last time I was there, and instead of spending any time with me, he just played bridge, the whole time I was there. The good thing is that he understands that because he sent me an email apologizing for not being there, but the whole time he was just playing bridge. I'm being honest, it's just kind of the way he's been. Morris Shackney. I'm ashamed to tell you that I've misplaced my first so-called chapter, so if you don't want me to repeat the same stories, can you please send me a copy and I'll print it? I'll try to keep this part. I have to tell you that my daughter Jane and I exchange emails almost every morning. She lives in Indiana. Yesterday, I told her I was going to email you about everything I can remember about Hannah, and the first thing she tells me is how she loves your grandma's lemon bars. And she would love to have the recipe if you or your mom have it. I was surprised. I didn't think she remembered. Your grandma's capacity for unconditional love was always present. I will continue tomorrow, because right now my tears blind me. Jeff Shackney. My father became very involved with business, and the truth is, he was never a big family guy. More or less a loner, and he came to family dinners, and he would give anything to anyone if anyone needed something, but he wasn't the emotional type. I think religion was very important to him. He went to rabbinical school, but when he married my mother, she wasn't religious at all. So truthfully, we went to the temple for high holidays and Shabbos, and we didn't eat bread for Passover, but we certainly weren't kosher, and at best we were conservative. I think it was more about work for my dad. He was in the feather and down business, and he worked hard. I spent the summers working with him, so I got to see from a business perspective that he worked really hard to support the family. I knew your grandmother well, but just by visiting her, and of course she was very sweet. But what I've always been told is that she was so crazy in love with her first husband, and obviously she was devastated when she found out he was killed. I don't really know anything about it. Obviously, she was crazy about him, and she thought he was alive, the whole time she was in the camps. But she had no idea he was dead until she got out. In fact, I think it was Betty that thought Hannah's husband had survived, not Hannah. And then when she saw Hannah finally after the war, she thought she was seeing a ghost. I never heard that story till last week. Unbelievable. There's probably so much history that would be incredible to know, right? Uncle Morris Shackney. Dear Amy, just connecting with you and your mom has made me very happy, thanks to your grandma. The only thing I remember about myself is I used to be kind of sickly. And Rizel, my sister, she would always call me the Jewish word roser, like with a runny nose. I don't know whether I had a cold or allergies, but she seemed to remember that my nose was always running. I always remember the difference between my sister Rizel and Hannah in the way they remembered me. Your grandma always spoke to me about good memories she had of me, whereas Rizel only remembered that I had a runny nose. So it was your grandma that gave me the confidence that I always had. She was a great seamstress, and her work saved my sister Rizel's ass, many times, especially during the war in Czechoslovakia. I remember a story that before any terrible acts happened in town, there was work that had to be done, like sewing uniforms for German soldiers. And I remember Hannah told me the story about the time she had done both the work for her and Rizel, because Rizel was not very good at sewing. Your grandma was always the one who did the most. I believe she had special schooling in cooking and baking, and she was very good at it. I'm not sure if your other sisters were, but that made your grandma a very important part of the family. It's strange that I don't recall Rizel being so helpful. Marilyn Ostraker. Rizel was a little nutty. Could she talk? But she was sweet, much younger than Grandma, and she had her share too, giving birth to dead babies 8 times. Grandma saved her life a few times. They were in jail together, in a holding place before Grandma went to the camps. Rizel, she wanted to kill herself, and Grandma wouldn't let her. And then, this is one thing Grandma told me herself. She told me it was her sewing that saved Rizel's life. In jail, the Nazis asked who could sew. And they had all these people lined up to sew, at the sewing machines. And Grandma said, I can sew, but Rizel couldn't. So Grandma, she would quickly sew the extra uniforms and sneak the fabric to her sister, which could have killed her, but she did it anyway. She was a hero. When the Germans saw that she could sew, they took her where they could sew uniforms in the camps, and that made her life easier. She had a skill they were going to use. And they were killing people every day, so she was useful. She loved sewing me costumes. I remember she was so proud of the Queen Esther costume that she made me for Purim, and I loved it. But she never taught me how to sew. It brought back bad memories for her. She said, I'm not going to teach my daughter something I had to do to survive. But she always sewed for everyone else. So funny. My mother, she was always the one that went to the school conferences with the teachers, and she would always test me on my multiplication tables and encourage me to get a top education, very book smart. And she attempted to go to night school, but she quit because she felt like she had no reason to top my father and become more educated. That was a mistake on her part, I feel. I guess she wanted a different life for her children. We grew up kind of poor in Canarsie, and Grandma worked like a dog as a seamstress. A lot of times she didn't feel well, like stomach issues, and now I think she might have been depressed. Dad would say, your mother doesn't feel well, I'll take you somewhere. And he would take us to Canada or something, or the park, or just to get out for a day. She spent a lot of time just lying on the couch. I remember that. Oh, and she loved her soap operas. I remember at 1 o'clock, no, 12:30 actually, she just said, I've got to watch my soap operas, and she would always apologize for it. It was so cute, just to see a smile. Grandma didn't waste words. She wasn't quiet, she held a lot in. Like you knew something, like the Holocaust had taken its toll. Because occasionally she would talk about something. I know, like you'd ask her about something like in the old country, and she would make asides, like little asides, and not even know it. Maybe nothing specific, but you could like